Just start, I guess.
All right.
So, welcome everyone to the Moral Economy. I'm one of your hosts, Eddie.
I'm another one of your hosts, Chell.
I am a third of your hosts. Wait, Andrew.
And I'm your other host, Fred.
The disembodied spirit.
Where's that voice coming
Where's that
from?
voice coming from?
Today we're going to be answering some of the questions we got on Reddit. So we as the Moral Economy posted some questions on Reddit just to kind of get a sense from the philosophers on Reddit what they think about some of our basic thoughts about a moral economy, what that could actually mean.
Specifically, we asked the Reddit subreddit, Ask Philosophy, what are your conceptions of and questions about a moral economy? And we got their answers, and we were very happy with them, I think, overall.
Yeah, good comments, good questions, good answers.
Yeah, all around. So, just to start, we think the questions in general, there were three overarching questions. The first being, why is a moral economy desirable in the first place? The second is, how is a democratic economy a moral economy? And the third is, how is a democratic economy even feasible? And because we got a lot of responses, we're going to be targeting our answers at three responses / questions that we think answer these three broad questions the most. But hopefully we'll be able to bring in for everyone answers for everyone.
Yeah. I'd like to start off by just saying that it seems a main assumption all of the questions had was that when we said a moral economy, we somehow meant that everyone would be deciding about all kind of economic issues, which that's not, at least to my knowledge, is how we conceive a moral economy to be, but more generally that it's about making decisions at your workplace.
Yeah.
So you have some kind of good knowledge about the kind of questions you would be voting on.
Yeah, I mean, so one Redditor said something like, or asked something specifically to that. I don't see why I should think that the moral economy is one that, quote, includes all of us in the decisions that are made about the economy, unquote. I certainly don't think the only moral family or the only moral church or the only moral bowling club or the only moral movie set all require that each of us is included in the decisions made about the family or church or whatever. Why should I think about this? Think this about the economy? And as you were saying, I don't think that is our standing point at all. I think that is even sort of like maybe an absurd assumption about democracy is to think that we would all participate directly in democracy on a very high level, all of the world participating when it's about mundane things like bowling clubs, because in the end that would mean that we can't have a bowling club, and a bowling club that doesn't go bowling because it's caught up by the decisions that or caught up by direct democracy isn't really a bowling club because it doesn't go bowling, and therefore it's not really a moral bowling club either.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if the whole world has to agree that my bowling club meets on Tuesday, then my bowling club will definitely not meet on Tuesday, because it'd be really hard to get the whole world to agree to that. Yeah. So for example, on the other hand, though, I mean, within the bowling club, I don't know. I mean, I'm also kind of inclined to think that a bowling club is more moral to the extent that they allow members to make decisions together about when to meet. I mean, if you have a bowling club where one guy's like, we're going to meet this day, and if you don't want to meet them, then you can leave the bowling club, and he's just one guy always playing a dictator. I mean, okay, so, maybe
hopefully they'll kick that guy out.
Hopefully they'll kick that guy out. That's right. I mean,
or reason with the guy first, and then if
sure.
he's unreasonable, kick the guy out. But that's definitely legitimate. Actually, the whole idea of direct democracy is taking other people into account, and that's, you would hope the bowling club does that. not that they're taking the whole world into account, just the people relevant to the bowling
club. Yeah, that's right.
So,
I mean, bowling clubs are not the most morally sort of pressing issue that we have.
Yeah,
to
but
deal
it's
with.
it's a good example because it's it's kind of mundane and doesn't bring
bowling is not mundane, all right?
Bowling is fun. We all agree. Bowling is fun.
Yeah,
We're all most of us are Americans here, but it's not like the Palestine Israeli issue. It's not TPP. It's not the refugee crisis.
But still, a more moral bowling club would be a bowling club where at least there's some kind of democratic input.
Yeah.
I mean, the question about the church is maybe a little bit more complicated. The moral movie set also may be a little bit more complicated.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, there is some connection in my mind between having democratic input and having a more moral sort of outcome or association, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the church and the the movie set, and then of course the government and the community and the factory, they might all be different things, but they still have the same sort of starting point. I would see is that you're trying to at least take other people into consideration, and I don't see, in fact, how you can be moral at all unless you start taking other people into consideration. When you go to a supermarket, I hope everyone is thinking about maybe where the things they're buying came from, what sort of working conditions the people who produced it had, what they were paid, but also the whole chain of transportation of getting there and that tying into climate and stuff like that. And just at least thinking about it, not even maybe you have no choice but to buy this type of food, but you want a choice at least.
All right. Yeah, I think that question's settled. Yeah.
Good. Well, so should we start with why a moral economy is desirable in the first place? We're back.
We're back. We were never gone.
We were never gone.
Yeah, small glitch.
Okay, so we're going to answer the first question then.
So why a moral economy?
Why is a moral economy desirable in the first place?
Well, I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is that now we do not have a moral economy.
Yeah.
And look what kind of problems we have. I mean, we have, kids working, forced labor. We have concentration of wealth to a very small percentage. We have people in poverty, starvation. We have all the resources, all the wealth in the world to solve all of our biggest issues, and we cannot because our economy is not moral. And I think a moral economy would address these biggest issues.
Yeah, at the very least, right?
At the very least.
Yeah. I think these examples of injustice and all of these problems are outcomes of the economy the way it is now. They're not there for other reasons. They're directly there because of economic reasons.
Right.
And so it seems. I mean, we're very close to this issue. I mean, we call ourselves the moral economy. So maybe it's a little bit difficult for us to even answer this question because it's just super obvious to us. I mean, of course, a moral economy is desirable. What would the alternative be? An immoral economy? I mean,
yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, the alternative could be an amoral economy, an economy that doesn't
care.
Really care too much, or doesn't even bother.
Or thinks it's beyond questions of morality.
That thinks it's beyond questions of morality, which we can show empirically it leads to immoral outcomes.
I mean, and that's also to a certain degree what economists say of our economy. They say, okay, people are rational; it's just the way we are. It's not a moral, determination, or it's just an observation of human nature. But I think that that's all wrong.
Well, Amartya Sen, well-known Nobel Prize-winning economist, I mean, he argues exactly this: that we are also ethical beings.
Yeah.
We cannot detach. We cannot
questions
detach.
of morality.
Questions of morality from economics.
Yeah.
From our rationality.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, economics likes to pretend it's a descriptive science, but I think it's a normative science.
Yeah.
And it's actually trying to propose a way that we ought to be. And I think the way that it proposes is wrong, but that's maybe a question for another time.
I mean, that's actually a very good question. Is to what extent is economics descriptive, and to what extent is it normative?
Yeah.
But that's maybe a question for another day. We still kind of do need to answer why is a moral economy desirable in the first place. I mean, okay, we might say, well, why should we want an immoral economy or an amoral economy that leads to immoral outcomes? But I would say even just more fundamentally, why is that a question of shouldn't we we going for morality? Shouldn't that be like the goal that we have? Like, isn't that like the highest thing that we should be striving for? I mean, getting out of religion and stuff like that. Even if you're not religious, which none of us are, morality seems like the sort of thing you would want to strive for in everything, not just the economy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, we all agree on that.
Good.
That's good. Okay, well, let's liven this shit up.
Let's throw stuff at each other.
Yeah.
The talking ball?
The talking ball.
The talking ball. Okay, whatever.
Right. Give it to Frat.
Give it to Frat. Yeah, make Frat talk.
The unembodied voice.
Yeah.
Disembodied voice.
Disembodied voice. Disembodied voice, would you like to weigh in on this?
Alright, number 2?
Alright, number 2. I guess that's answered, right? So
I mean,
Totally.
yeah.
I think so.
So number 2, how is a democratic economy a moral economy? Just to give some background, we in the Reddit discussion said that the only moral economy would be a democratic economy. I think that our reason for that for us is obvious because we see morality as involving other people in what we do, or at least taking other people into consideration. But obviously, it's not so obvious, and we need to clarify that.
Mm-hmm.
So, how is a democratic economy a moral economy? And I also see the reason for asking this tied up with the first thing that we addressed was why should everyone be involved in my church or in my moral bowling club or in my moral film studio. I don't want to again say that morality means, or a democratic economy means, that everyone is on a national or international level deciding about things, but maybe on a local level.
Grassroots level.
Grassroots level.
This reminds me of another question that appeared on our Reddit here. One guy, a Moses Trod, asks us to differentiate between form and content. He asks us, how does changing or democratizing the management of capitalist production relate to the content of that production? And I think that goes. I think our answer to that goes directly in the same direction as how we would answer.
It goes also, I think, to the labor theory of value. And I say that because I think you made a good point. You had a good response. Where you said we had a good response to that. Where I think we said something along the lines. Well, maybe you can help me. Talk about what we said, but.
That's right. No, so for me, it seems that, and we also discussed this a bit. It seems that that if you were to have a directly democratic, take for example a factory where the workers decide not only what they produce but also they distribute the profits equally amongst themselves, then it seems that any profit or wealth that the workers would then accumulate selling their products on the marketplace for profit. Would be, because they share this wealth, it would be directly reflective of the actual value of the labor that they put into the thing that they produced.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? So the thing that they're producing is still for profit. But now, because it's fair, or because they're sharing this wealth, and because this sharing then reflects the actual value of their labor, I would then ascribe morality or moral to this product as well. Not only is it a product for profit, but it's also a moral product.
It's non-exploitative.
It's non-exploitative, exactly. Yeah, that's it.
And then and then all things held equal, if we have a choice between this product and the choice between the exact same product by sweatshop labor in China, child slavery in China, well, we choose.
Yeah,
right. I
yeah.
mean,
The moral product.
That's a moral question.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
we don't even have to call it the moral product, but maybe the question of buying it is moral, right? So, yeah.
Okay.
I guess that's answered.
Yeah, I think so too.
That's
Where do
easy.
we go from there?
Then this question number 3, right? How is a democratic economy even feasible? And this is, of course, a little bit more tricky.
Well, I mean, there's empirical research to this. I mean, there are economic rather democratic companies, right? Mondragon being the best example, seventh largest company in Spain, totally democratically controlled, successful, more efficient than their capitalist counterparts. Pretty impressive,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this question comes from one person who posted actually, I think for me the most interesting critiques or questions. The first was that he had a Hayekian critique, and he says bilateral exchange involves only the local knowledge of the preferences of the participants, whereas a system which includes more participants requires information about preferences to be distributed further. Such distribution would be costly and need to be constantly updated to account for changing conditions, and if we're mistaken, that might lead to an immoral outcome. So,
to me, this question seems a lot weaker if we take into account what we've already said, which is the fact that we're talking about local questions.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we have to, remind ourselves and people, we're not talking about everyone, being informed about everything by every single, company or whatever, but we're talking about, well, even if, it's just you and me trading bilateral exchange, there are other people who are affected by this bilateral exchange, and they should, maybe know about this bilateral exchange, depending on the nature of the exchange, to a certain extent.
Right, because that could be extended ad infinitum.
Yeah, that could obviously be extended ad infinitum, up to universe. You should be taking aliens into account, right? No, but we should maybe take Chell into account, especially if Chell is the slave that we're trading, right?
Especially if I'm the slave.
I mean, there are economies where there.
We're sick and tired of all your lies, your unwillingness to compromise. So we'll take it into our own hands. Educate ourselves and take a stand. We're gonna occupy your street, your house, your bank accounts, your everything, yes, everything. Oh, we're here to occupy. I know we feel it's time we occupy. Hey, I reckon it's a revolution. When it's all said and done, you will find no place to hide, nowhere to run.
So there have been slave economies, and obviously that question of information does pertain to the slave. I mean, obviously that's sort of moot because the slave economy is already immoral in the first place. But still, I mean, it's one example. And then every single one of us, let's say that we're workers in a factory, and we have families and stuff like that. Well, our families, our communities, they should be informed of the decisions that happen, perhaps, right?
Yeah.
And then this other side of it, to me, the other side of it is that if the bilateral exchange, if one person has more information than the other, well, then that's exploitation, and you can use the information that you have in order to exploit other people. And again, that's immoral. So that's also going back to why is a moral economy desirable in the first place? Well, because it leads away from exploitation.
And returning just a bit, so to the feasibility, really quick, from my perspective, which is similar but maybe a little bit different. I think that if we're going to start anywhere, we really have to start again at a very local community level, factory by factory, where factories sort of adopt directly democratic structures. And I think it is maybe a bit revolutionary even to talk about it, but I think it doesn't necessarily imply a huge mass revolution. I think that we can we can by small steps begin democratizing factories and workplaces, and if you add some generations to this, we may be eventually in a moral economy.
Yeah, small steps in and of themselves, but together they end up.
One of the Redditors commented, he gave us some reading suggestions, and I appreciate it. I don't know who it was, but one of the readings was David Schweikart. I've been reading some of his stuff, good stuff, thank you for that. And he makes a very interesting point about, the fact that economic democracy is such a revolutionary thing, but how strange is it that it's such a revolutionary thing? I mean, democracy is one of the highest principles in the West, but still it doesn't make up part of our one of our most important aspects in our lives, our work. We spend most of our times at work, and yet it has a dictatorship kind of relationship. Right? We don't get to vote our bosses, but yet we get to vote the people who send their children to war. We get to vote in the people who make our legislation. Right? And so, why is it so revolutionary to
because we're even convinced now that this voting people into office is democracy. I mean, it's has democratic elements. Obviously, voting is obviously some form of democracy, but as soon as the people are in office, they are able to make decisions for us, and we see that they have hierarchical structures along the same lines of factories, or maybe factories have hierarchical structures along the same lines as governments. And so it's hard to actually see maybe the difference between these two things, other than that one is one that we vote for and the other one is one that we don't. And so for one, why do we vote here and not there? Right? And two, maybe we even want to start reconsidering what democracy is in the first place.
And I think that takes us to another point, which is we can never really have democracy until the workplace is democratized. Especially if we see all the money that is thrown into elections. I mean, I think our American election is going to cost us $1 billion, $2 billion, $3 billion. What's the number? It's in the billions. I mean, what we can do with that kind of money, right? The Koch brothers are investing $800 million to any candidate who supports their kind of creed.
Craziness.
Craziness. And so workplace democracy seems to be a start for a remedy for the money that's influencing.
And it's really, you compare the two levels, right? I mean, where we spend all this money on these federal, elections in the United States. We elect a president that's some sort of crazy personality. And then, like Andrew says, and then he kind of goes into the back rooms and makes decisions that we don't really have much influence on. And those decisions do have a very significant impact on our lives, but we don't see them immediately. We don't really know exactly how or where these impacts are happening.
Or like TPP.
I was just thinking that's a case in point.
Exactly, like TTP, exactly.
But CETA and...
But then the other level, the level of the workplace, I mean, that's a direct impact. If I have a vote, at the workplace, we say, do we want a new coffee machine, for example? It's kind of maybe not the best example.
It's another mundane
it's a very simple,
example.
It's a mundane example, but it's a simple example. People say, it costs this much, let's vote on it. And then they vote on it, and then we get a new coffee machine, or we don't. That has a direct and tangible impact on my life, And if maybe we vote, what if we vote about pay structures? I think let's vote ourselves a raise, or vote ourselves less money because the company's having some problems.
Or have actual control over profit, which is a certain amount of money which is automatically taken away from the workers and therefore no longer invested into their lives.
Or working hours, or flexi time, or pretty much any of the things that happen at work. Those are things that we see directly. If we make a change today, by voting for something, we see that change immediately. If suddenly it's we only work 7 hours instead of 8 hours a day, bam, that's one hour free, or if we work 9 hours instead of 8 hours, that's 1 extra hour of work. We see that change immediately.
Right.
And that's for me what democracy is. Democracy is not voting for Obama,
Abstract.
hope, these giant posters of faces on the wall and things that I don't really understand, or I don't know what these guys are doing or what they really are intending to do in the back of their minds. For me, democracy is where I can have an actual, tangible, immediate impact on my surroundings, my own environment.
Here.
Here.
So
And I just want to comment that I believe that someone can immediately say, "Oh, look, but if you were always voting for things, it's going to be inefficient." And I want to respond and say there's a lot of empirical evidence on workers' self-directed enterprises, democracy in the workplace, and they're actually a lot more efficient than capitalist structures.
Well, I want to get into that actually, but I want to draw us back to, because there was the question of voting and stuff like that, and the same user who asked the previous question about Hayek, he brought up arrows and
what's his name?
possibility.
We can mention their Reddit names. That's fine.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I have to go up and look for it.
I was looking
too.
too.
He knows who. He knows who, or she.
You know who you are.
Yeah, you know who you are.
Thanks, guy.
She
or
knows me
lady.
who this lady.
Yeah.
If they've been watching this.
Unicorn.
You are watching.
You are
I know.
watching
Yes. The whole world.
Arrows of possibility theorem. So they say the system must be something more than just a rank ordering of preferences, because then arrows of possibility theorem applies.
Right.
And I presume that we just can't use prices because that's just the system we have now. So what are the alternatives? And
Before you get into it, can you explain to those viewers that don't know what arrows and possibility theorem is?
Heaven should notice, it's everyone, and we're coming for you. It can't be undone, won't be undone. We're gonna occupy your street, your house, your bank accounts, your everything, yes, everything. Oh, we're here to occupy. I know it, feel it's right. It's time to occupy. Hey, I reckon it's a revolution.
Okay, so for people who don't know about arrows and possibility theorem, I will provide a link to Wikipedia.
Have fun.
Have fun.
Reading that.
It's not fun.
we don't think it actually really applies to us, because we're talking about direct democracy and also about deliberation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we see as the most feasible part of it,
Mm-hmm.
of what we're talking about. Is the deliberation, taking people's preferences into account in your own process of deciding your preferences.
Yeah, talking about them with
Yeah,
other people.
Talking about them,
Yeah,
because in the end that means that you have outcomes that are way more efficient, just because they're actually seeing to people's needs, and not because you just decide to make something and hope it and you leave it to the market to see if it provides people's needs.
Yeah. It seems that deliberation is a way out of the problem with arrows and possibility theorem. So in arrows and possibility theorem, basically, individuals have two choices. You either vote sincerely according to what your actual preferences are, or you vote strategically if you don't think you can get your top choice. And if you add a bunch of economic mathematics and weird thinking, neoclassical thinking,
Neoclassical, yeah.
then you end up with the outcome that you need a dictator to make any decisions whatsoever. And I think that this works great with inside of the science of economics. science. And but there's a third way
Soft
that's
science.
pseudo. I think is the.
Ooh.
But,
Low.
but I think there's a third way, and that's simply deliberation. Because it's not that we're robots that only have like two alternatives available to us. We can also sit down and actually discuss what we think about things and listen to other people, and this is definitely a possibility.
Yeah,
And I think,
and to me that definitely links in with our humanity.
Yeah.
We are not just these individual bubbles. We're not just brains in vats.
yeah.
We actually are given by our interactions, by our communities,
Mm.
our history, where we're raised, so on and so forth.
We're
So-
not Homo economicus.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So deliberation is very much part of our humanity,
Yes. And has been.
Yeah.
And will be.
and will continue to be.
Okay, well, I mean, but a criticism to this might be that uninformed voters don't vote randomly. We see that uninformed voters hold strong preferences and aren't afraid to share them. And how could giving us some say in economic sectors that we're ignorant about lead to a more moral outcome, given the evidence so far?
But
So,
we've
I mean,
settled this question.
No, we settled this in terms of, we're not talking about higher up, right? But even within your own company or something like that, there might be things you don't know about. And this is another way of sort of solving this question, is that, hey, if it's direct democracy and you also see that you're participating in it, then you're going to be more informed. You're going to want to be more informed. You're not just going to have uninformed opinions and hold them strongly, but there's going to be no way but to become more informed in this sort of way of doing democracy.
Direct democracy will lead to better information because people will, feel sort of a more sort of personal connection to the things that they're deciding about. I mean, I have a much more pessimistic view of people. I think that people will simply not spend the time to go and vote.
Yeah, that is a concern.
Well,
But that's actually, I think that's a good thing. I rely on that in my crazy anarchist system.
Mhm.
I expect that only about 20% of the community will ever show up to any sort of vote, and that will keep the costs of voting down. To come back to that economic language that I dislike so much, but
But I have a response to this. I think you're right. I am pessimistic as well. But given our current society,
Mhm.
I think in a society that does incorporate more workers' self-directed enterprises, the notion of cooperation and democracy will become more normal, and more people would vote as a result.
I mean, yeah, totally. I mean, for me, like, I'm all about the consensus voting rule. I want 100% agreement, I mean, okay, so this is a little bit my own project, maybe a little bit, not exactly,
That's tough.
that's real tough. But that's why I'm relying on the fact that, or on the hope that less people come to vote. Now if the issue is an important issue and really affects everybody and people feel strongly or passionately about them, then of course they'll come to vote. And everybody will know when the vote's happening and where the vote's happening and what we're talking about, what we're discussing, what we're deliberating over, All of that information will be totally available. Yeah, and if you really feel strongly about something, you show up, you deliberate, you vote. But if it's something like you're like, meh, not so
I mean,
interesting,
that's getting into like sort of technical details about this type of economy. And it's getting into something that
anarchism.
one person asks is, how do you compare with anarcho-syndicalism?
Mhm.
Well, I don't know. Maybe we're pretty anarcho-syndicalist.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
pretty much
Yeah,
on that.
But other people, just to give some kudos now to some questions, going further than this, I would like to see discussion on whether the Marxist framework epistemological method is indispensable or not for designing a socio-economically ideal society. And also, one other person mentioned Marx. I can't find it. Someone said he hopes we see Marx in what we're talking about. And so I want to say yes, we have lots of Marx.
Yeah. If you've
Yeah.
watched the podcast before,
Yeah.
we've mentioned him once or twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, we mentioned him a lot, actually.
Yeah, probably maybe once a podcast at
Once,
least.
Marx.
But
Should drop more M-bombs? Marx.
Marx.
Marx. Yeah, I mean, where did we start?
I mean, I don't want to start. Well, I don't want to answer like any specific questions about Marx, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Were there questions?
one
Yeah,
question
there
was
was,
about
there was.
Marxist epistemology and its
Yeah.
role in what? In a moral economy? Was that it?
I'll look it up. Hold on.
Yeah, I could do that too. Thank you. So Marxist
Talk about Marx.
epistemology.
Yeah.
I mean, we have the greatest Marxist thinker in the world as our disembodied voice.
Our disembodied voice. Yeah.
So it's he's saying she is saying going it was going on this Zweikarts thing that you mentioned, Eddie.
Right.
It's going further than this. I would like to see a discussion on whether the Marxist framework / epistemological method is indispensable or not for designing a socio-economically ideal society.
Can I? You want to
Go
say,
ahead.
I want to say something. Yes. And why? Right. Well, because what Marx's magnum opus, Das Kapital, is a critique of capitalism, and it's a good critique, and we still use them nowadays. I mean, as much as neoclassical economists hate to admit it, I mean, his crisis theory is still being used, right? And so I think it's indispensable because we have to analyze our reality, our capitalist society, to change it, to reach anything better, different. We have to understand, I mean, we're philosophers, we're theorists here, we like to speculate, but we also have to
We're literally in armchairs.
We're literally in armchairs,
Yeah.
right? We have to understand the real world around us, and we have to act according to that real world. And I think Marx gives us great tools to understand that real world. Now, for those that are not so involved in philosophy and economics, they think Marx is just a utopian thinker. Well, no, I mean, he's actually a critic. That's primarily what he is. And that's how we use him, I think. We use him as a critic. Of course, he's not a god. He has many flaws. But he has many great things that can be used. And so, yes, absolutely, he's indispensable.
Yeah. It's always good to end on Marx, I think. Right?
Yeah. Are there any other questions that we're missing?
I mean, I had the kudos to Marxists, so no. I mean,
Nothing on Marx.
And maybe on what you said, that Marx's critique is not, maybe not that's a question. Is it a universal critique or not? Because if you think about his magnum opus, you mentioned it's a critique of political economy, which is the ideology driving capitalism. The ideology that tries to justify capitalism as a moral system. The premise of political economy is that, okay, the resources might be distributed unequally, but that doesn't matter. Because through cooperation in the market, we are all going to benefit from it. That's the ideology, and that's what Marx attacks specifically.
Yeah.
Marx says that, no, your conclusions do not follow from your premises. Free market economy with wage labor and all the other fundamental capitalist institutions, they do not generate the desired result. And
Yeah.
that's why a pinch of a moral perspective, maybe that might be the thing that, at least to start with, at least to have a concrete critique of modern capitalism. Because that's really the most obvious aspect of capitalism today, that it's so immoral. That this is what we hear in the news all the time anyway, right? No, everybody is a critic of capitalism today. We don't have a lack of critique of capitalism. What we need to have is a critique of political economy which justifies capitalism. And that's where we need to reclaim our ideas of morality. That we cannot leave morality take care of itself in the market.
you hear that invisible hand? That's the disembodied voice,
Yeah.
right?
Invisible hand against disembodied voice.
Yeah, I take the disembodied voice
Oh, yeah,
every
yeah.
single time.
I think we can agree to that.
All right, so I think we're done.
Yeah, so shout out to all the people who commented on our Reddit. We didn't
Yeah.
get to all of you.
Yeah, we didn't get to all of
but,
you.
we did also post some thoughts to the Reddit.
Yeah,
so
and I'll be posting some more of
Mhm.
what I
we
had
thought about.
thought would be good to be posted.
Yeah,
And
yeah. So follow our Reddit and follow our podcast, and
We'd like to hear more from you.
yeah. Please continue to comment and ask more questions, and we will do our best to answer them in the future.
Peace.
Thanks.
All right, we're
That's
good.
Hey ho,
too?
Yeah, the video is being recording. This is recorded video. Chill.
Oh man.
No farts.
No parts.
I mean, even in the podcast, we shouldn't fart, right?
Yeah, that would be best.
You know they are working on a device that can actually let you communicate smell to the other
People.
party on the communication.
Cool.
That's disgusting.
All right, well, we're on camera now. So, Eddie.
Hold on, I want to get this online so I can reference it. Did you put it on where was it, on Facebook, right, on the chat?
What?
That. Where can I get
It's
that?
in the drive.
It's in the drive? Okay, so that's Google Drives.
This is all just going in the end, you know.
We're gonna put this in the end?
I do.
Okay.
Okay, I mean, I'll just start and I'll get it. You guys keep talking and I'll load it in.
Okay, yeah, okay. So how are we gonna start?